Welcome to Dad Gives Advice. My name is Orestes, and this is my second video in the series on More Perfect. The idea behind this series is to talk about things that I think need to be tweaked or changed in the American political system in order for us to make a more perfect union, as it says in our Constitution. In this video, I want to discuss the money in politics, or what is sometimes referred to as campaign finance. The fact today is that politicians need to raise large sums of money in order to get elected. The statistics always prove out that if one candidate spends much more money than the other, that candidate tends to win, regardless of his or her views on the issues that their constituents are interested in. Voters tend to have very busy lives, and they don't always have time to pay attention to all of the details behind those who are running for a particular race, and so they rely on advertising in order to get to know who's running and decide which candidate to vote for. This then requires politicians to spend lots and lots of money on advertising and on the people that they need on the ground in order to get the word out about their platform and their political stances. This then tends to become an escalating race to see who can raise the most money in a particular election cycle. You might stop to ask, why is there so much money in politics to begin with? Isn't it a massive conflict of interest to have politicians have to raise huge sums of money in order to get elected? I mean, wouldn't they be beholden to the highest money donors once they got into office and simply ignore the needs of the constituents that they're actually supposed to be serving? The short answer is yes. This is the problem with large sums of money in politics. Undue influence from those who can afford it. When corporations or individual wealthy donors donate hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars to a political campaign, they have to feel like they're entitled to preferential treatment from the politician once they get elected to office. And politicians receiving those funds from wealthy donors have to feel a ton of pressure to go to bat for those who provided the large majority of their campaign funds. And this may result in them doing the opposite of what their constituents voted them into office to do. A recent example came up prior to the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022. This was a bill that had no Republican support in the Senate and required all 50 Democratic senators to sign on. Senator Kyrsten Sinema of Arizona was one of the last holdouts and only agreed to vote for the bill after a provision that would have eliminated the carried interest loophole was removed from the draft. What is this carried interest loophole? Well, that's a bit of a long story, but the short version is that hedge fund managers are able to exploit this in order to pay only 15 to 20% income tax rather than the nearly 40% that they would have to pay if this did not exist. Other high-income earners in their tax bracket would normally pay around 40%, but these guys can get away with paying about 15 to 20% with this loophole. Most of these hedge fund managers live and work in New York, but they have contributed millions of dollars to Sinema's campaigns over the last several years. That's right, rich people that work and live in New York can contribute to an Arizona senator's political race and have undue influence over that senator over and above Arizonans themselves. In the case of this carried interest tax loophole, Sinema is holding the hedge fund managers' interests above those of the citizens of Arizona and, by extension, the citizens of the United States. Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia held up the bill for a long time because he wanted to gut provisions in it that would require the coal industry to reduce emissions and move to cleaner ways of delivering power in the state of West Virginia and across the nation. What's the conflict there? Mr. Manchin receives a large amount of direct compensation from a coal brokerage firm called EnerSystems, which he and his family founded before he became a senator, and is now run by his son. When asked about this conflict, Mr. Manchin will say that he put all his interest in EnerSystems in a blind trust and he has no idea what they are doing. But this trust receives a large amount of money in dividends every year, $500,000 in 2020 alone. So it's in Manchin's best interest to not touch the coal industry in West Virginia and let it continue to do what it's doing so they can continue to receive those large dividends. This is in direct conflict to the citizens of West Virginia, who then have to live with unclean air and the issues associated with climate change resulting in greenhouse gas emissions from the burning of coal. And all of this is legal because the current system allows it. Our founding fathers did not have this system in mind when they first set out to write the Constitution. That is clear. It is not supposed to work this way. And it has been broken for a very long time, with politicians from both parties taking advantage of the system and being beholden to large money donors. Very few politicians have pledged to take only minimum contributions from individuals and not take large money donations from the wealthy or from corporations. The proposed solutions to these problems usually go under the name of campaign finance reform. A few of the steps that need to be taken are these. First, eliminate the ability of wealthy individuals or corporations to have undue influence by being able to give unlimited funds of money. This is typically done through political action committees or PACs and super PACs. Super PACs are ways in which organizations can raise unlimited funds for electing public officials as long as those public officials don't have direct coordination with the super PAC. It's all very shady and it should just all go away. This would bring it back down to a single individual or single corporation paying a limited amount of money per election cycle, rather than unlimited funds going to elect politicians. Truly limit political campaign donations to a reasonable, fixed amount of money that is indexed to inflation. Nothing more. Those in office who have a conflict like Mansions should be excluded from voting on issues that relate to the industries that pay them large amounts of money in compensation. No donations should be allowed from people or corporations that reside outside of the state where the politician resides. Why should wealthy hedge fund managers in New York have more influence over an Arizona senator than Arizonans themselves? People holding public office should not be allowed to trade in individual stocks, since they are privy to non-public material information that could change the price of a stock dramatically after the news gets out. This gives them an unfair advantage over the general public. This loophole is exploited by many in Congress when they know ahead of time that a bill that they're about to pass will funnel large amounts of money into a particular industry or a particular sector. And with that information, they'll buy stocks in that industry or in that sector before the information gets out and profit nicely once the news hits the street. Trading in material non-public information like this would land any other individual in jail after having to pay large fines and all of the profits back. But it's perfectly legal for our congressmen to do it. Why would we let them get away with it? This sort of thing creates incentives for politicians to vote for projects that will spend large amounts of money in certain industries in ways that will maximize their profit potential when trading stocks, as opposed to spending in ways that is in the public's best interest. Politicians at the state and federal level should be limited to investing only in index funds that have no affiliation to either industry verticals or sectors. There are other good ideas out there, like having only political parties being responsible for raising funds and taking the money-raising aspect out of the hands of the politicians so they don't have to worry about it and they don't have to sully themselves with that particular task. There's even proposals to have a government-run fund that will fund politicians' campaigns so that politicians on either side of a race get exactly the same amount of money and are then able to budget and spend for advertising or whatever they need to do on equal footing without having to worry about the other outspending them. These and other concepts to help with campaign finance reform are shown at a Brookings Institute testimony that's online. I'll provide the link to that here and in the description of this video. The only way for us as Americans to solve this problem is to support politicians that will pledge to take steps towards campaign finance reform. Until we have that, the large sums of money in politics will drive the incentives of politicians towards the needs of the wealthy and the corporations and away from that of their constituents and for the average U.S. citizen. For a more perfect union, we need to drastically reduce the influence of large money donors on our political system. Let me know if you have any questions about this or any other topic, and if you have any suggestions for future topics. Thanks for watching and have a great day.